Welcome to the TNT podcast. I'm Tokumbo.
And I'm Toyin.
And today we are so thrilled to welcome Jumoke to the podcast. Jumoke is an HR professional who relocated to the United States from Nigeria. So she brings a unique perspective on what it means to carry the culture, values, and dreams of one's homeland to a new environment. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you
Very
so much
excited
for joining
Thank
us. We're really excited to have you here.
Very excited to be here.
Information you're going to provide for us.
Yes.
But I just want to ask you, so prior to actually doing the relocation and coming here, what was life like for you in Nigeria? Either being like corporate life or just working or growing up or just...
The usual, typical growing up, very religious family. Actually, my mom, my dad wasn't too, but my mom was pretty religious, and I was the first girl. I have siblings. I have an older brother and other siblings. And also, I think there was a lot of expectation as well. I was a smart child, and for some reason, they probably just thought, oh, she's smart. She should probably read, one of the three major courses.
Doctor,
and engineer, and lawyer.
Like all
So
Nigerian
being a doctor
parents.
was a no-no. I was not interested in being a doctor. I was not interested in being a lawyer as well. So engineering just seemed like the best fit. My first degree was in mechanical engineering.
Oh, wow.
Weirdly. Yep.
Definitely smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
definitely mechanical engineering, and did that for 5 years. I graduated, and I think before I graduated, I already knew this wasn't a career path I wanted to do. But honestly, I had no inkling of what I wanted to do. And so graduation, I worked briefly in an engineering firm for a bit, and then I served in Abuja. So I would say Abuja was where my professional and corporate life took off.
Okay.
I served in a bank, and I was retained after youth service, and I stayed back in banking, but I wasn't very happy. I hated it with a passion, but banking wasn't just for me.
feel like
But it was
banking is
good
for everybody.
paying. It was nice, and the social status of banking and dressing nice and all that stuff. But I think I knew now banking is not for me. So what do I want to do? So getting into the NGO sector was by happenstance. I got in, and long story short, kind of started my HR career. And I was in that role for 8 years. The company I worked for in Nigeria, the headquarters is in the US.
Okay.
And a position opened up that I applied for. And so I went through the recruitment process. It was a very competitive recruitment process. I like to stress that because I think people assumed the job was handed over to me. It wasn't. I went through a
We all think that way
vigorous
too sometimes.
recruitment process, and I thought I did excellently well, but it was still a shock when I got an email saying I'd been selected for the position and the organization was going to be responsible for bringing me to the US. So I did move to the US on a work visa for this position in 2018. And then that's about the start of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because when I think about Nigeria, and I don't know anything about corporate Nigeria, but I just always want to compare, is it the same?
Right, like the
even from
recruitment process
exactly,
and stuff.
Is it the same as it is here?
I would say it depends on the organization. For Nigerian-born organizations, so these are organizations that are Nigerians, owned by Nigerians, kind of started in Nigeria, I would say their processes might be different. The sector I was an international NGO that happened to be in Nigeria. There are like 100 countries around the world. The Nigeria was one of the countries during we call it the country program. And so policies, procedures, standards of conduct, like everything was really kosher. Everything was straight, narrow, and
Because it was a US-based
exactly, it was a US-based
organization.
organization.
Yeah.
And so we had to do things in the right way: recruitment, selection, promotion processes, compensation practices as well. We were well paid. We had great benefits as well. And this was because this was an organization based here in the US, aligned with US, laws, employment laws as well. You could not discriminate. You had to provide reasonable accommodations to disabled people. And so basically we had to follow that. So in a way, I'm grateful because that kind of, put me in the limelight of what HR should be like. And it's not just the hiring and firing, but also the duty of care, ensuring you're attracting the best people, you're retaining, you're promoting, you're providing the right, developing and providing the right incentives and all that. So to your question, Antonia, I would say I know some organizations do try. But the Nigerian factor sometimes tends to creep in. In my case, that wasn't the case. I had to go through a vigorous process with different selection panels. It was nice to get the like, oh, you've been selected. I was like, oh, okay, nice.
Correct.
Coming to the US on the very first position.
Initially, you even joining that organization in the first place. How did you learn about that type of position?
That's a very good question because I think back and I think I made a great decision at that time. So I worked in a bank. The name of the bank is Echo Bank, and I was in a customer service, and I would never forget. I had this customer who would come in from time to time, deposits and all that kind of stuff. And we kind of developed a relationship. It was a middle-aged man, but just great guy. He just seemed to like me and ask me questions and all that kind of stuff, And I noticed it worked at that organization.
Okay.
Yeah. And he had a dorm account. And so sometimes he would need help with certain things and all that. And then one day he came in and was, hey, I'm hiring for an admin secretary, a receptionist, but it's temporary. Is it something you'll be interested in? And I was like, I think so. I hated banking, but it was a stable job. The pay was good. And he said this position was a temporary position. And I was, what happened? It was, the person there is going on maternity leave and they kind of wanted someone who could cover. And so they didn't want to kind of do like a full-blown, advert process and all that. And so just referrals and all that. But if I was interested, just, wrote his email address for me and was send me your resume and all that. And I thought about it. So I did send my resume. And then I got a call from the head of administration at that time who asked if I could come in for an interview. So I did go for an interview. I saw the CVs on the table and she was, this is a temporary position. It's not permanent. This is a maternity cover. I see you're in the banking sector in a permanent job. Just, no pressure, but think about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is tough. Why would I leave a known job?
Yeah.
I know.
Good pay for just something that was 3 months. But I think for me, coming into the organization was just very different. I came in wearing my suit and I saw everybody on jeans and
like,
t-shirts.
Dress, newbie.
It was very calm, very, it was different. And I was like, oh my God, like this is where I want to be and all that.
More relaxed.
So I told her, I said, I was going to think about it and get back to her. I was like, you know what, you have a point. That's a permanent job. And so I declined the job. I was like, I would have to decline. And so I left the building and I got, I'd hailed a taxi and I got into the taxi. And the taxi was driving. I think I heard something say, you better go back and accept that job.
Really?
So I told the taxi, hold on, please hold on.
Wow.
I jumped out of the taxi and I ran back in the building. I was like, you know what, I'll take it. Anyways, I ran back into the building. And I was, I'll take the job. She was like, you sure? I was, yes. She was, okay, we'll send you an offer letter. And they did send me an offer letter and the salary was twice what I was earning in banking. I mean, NGOs pay well.
Yeah.
The salary and the benefits was twice what I was earning. And I thought, I was like, even if I don't get retained, that's fine. I'll have some extra money.
Right.
It's still a risk because first you didn't know that it was going to be double
I didn't.
compensation.
True.
And then it was a temporary job.
True.
Which means what happens after 3 months?
Oh, the person didn't come back. And so
I'm just
I
saying,
got
like, you took a risk.
You see, but sometimes I think that's what it is. Sometimes though, you do have to make a gamble, right?
Yeah.
You could spend 50 years at a job that you don't like, or you could just take a gamble and say, let me try something new. You took a gamble.
I did.
And that risk,
Wow.
and sometimes it's worth it, right? It may not have panned out, but at least you tried, right? And you wanted something different for yourself, and ultimately you carved that out for yourself.
Yeah.
So then, what prompted the move to the US? Was that something you had always considered, or was a later decision? What made you take that plunge?
Nothing. Like I said, a position opened up. Prior then, I'd applied for other international positions within the same organization.
Yeah.
And I wasn't recommended. But the second international position I applied for, still the same organization, the hiring manager reached out to me after and said, I'm sorry you were not selected for this, but I think you'd be a great fit for this other position. I'm going to be sending your CV to this person. The other two international positions were not in the US.
Okay.
It was going to be me in Nigeria, but doing a lot of global travels.
Got it.
You know, and for me at that point, it made sense to remain in Nigeria, but do a lot of global travels around the countries where the organization was. And so this other position was the US, and in my mind, I was, okay, the US. I mean, it was unthinkable. I just didn't expect that was going to happen. But she did forward my CV to the hiring manager of the other position, and I got scheduled for an interview. And like I said, it was a competitive process, different stages, different panels. And I was shocked when I got the email that I'd been recommended for the position, and they wanted to begin the process of starting, bringing me to the US for this position. I was in shock, I was, okay.
Like, wow.
Who gets this type of opportunity?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I was in disbelief for a while, because I saw my offer letter, it was in USD, earning in Naira. I was like, oh my God, like what?
Let's make it happen.
You understand, like USD, and so, when I talk about my immigration experience and I hear all the immigrants lament, I just keep short because I'm like,
Yours was a different one, right?
Yeah.
I got picked up at the airport. Like at the airport.
Oh my
Like,
God.
I had a whole driver
You got housing,
Nice.
you got
with
things
a
for a while.
placard, my
Oh,
name
yeah.
on the placard.
That's
I was in a guest house for like a month. I got
Yeah.
a relo allowance in dollars. So, when I hear,
It was sweet.
Yeah, it was.
Well, you did pay your dues.
Oh, I
You
did.
did pay your dues.
I did.
So, I
did.
I should actually add that. So the way that I got to know Jumoke was she came to the organization. So we worked at the same organization together. So she came there. So then she was the other Nigerian person that, even though she always used to say that I wasn't Nigerian, she would literally introduce me like, she's Nigerian, but she's not Nigerian. And I'm like, I'm full Nigerian. But it was also very funny to our colleagues to always see a different perspective because she's a Nigerian who grew up in Nigeria and I'm a Nigerian who grew up in the US. I left Nigeria when I was a teenager. Yeah. So we would have different perspectives on things and they would find it so funny because she would be saying something and I'd be like, huh?
Actually, that brings me to the next question that I was going to ask you. So now that you've done the whole process and then you've now relocated, you started to work in this corporate America now. What did you identify as some of the difference in the, like corporate or
working in Nigeria versus the US?
Very, very different. I mean, you have clear laws and policies. I mean, every state, has clear laws.
Yeah.
And laws at the state, at the federal. So
level.
Everything is all, very, very, clear. And I think that was one of the struggles as well, having to come in and learn those laws. The EOC had to handle a lot of things that was, needed at that point. And it was good learning. My manager at that point, one of the very first things she did was just throw me into trainings. I remember, I think the first 2 weeks I came, I attended a training on employment law. In the US, and it was very detailed. We talked about different employment laws in the different states in the US. In California, particularly, looks like they tend to single out California itself.
Oh my God, California.
Those ones are very unique, So it was very good to to know that. So Nigeria, our labor laws it's probably not been updated in years. And there's so many nuances. We learn it, but trust me, it's not very clear. It's not very detailed. I don't think any changes has been made to that law till date. So there's a clear difference. To be fair, the US is way more developed, than Nigeria. So.
And structured when it comes
to structured and all
HR,
that. Yes, when it comes to HR. The only difference though is the US is as an at-will employer and technically could hire and fire you. In Nigeria, and I think that's where it's a little different. You kind of so I think it's the sector that I am, which is weird because the same organization in the US is an at-will employer, but in Nigeria, you're not an at-will employer. So if we needed to take separation or termination decisions, we had to follow due process. We had to involve a local lawyer and make sure that we had reasons, for letting people go.
Really? I would have never guessed that because all I think I see is, they sucked.
And I think that's just was the sector I was. And again, the sector I was in Nigeria, we just had to follow due process.
Because it's a US-based organization, they have to follow the country's local rules. So now the thing is, other organizations in Nigeria, they are also supposed to follow that rule, but it's just that people may not follow the practice, right? But because this is a US-based company, they have to follow.
Yeah, I see.
They're going to follow the practice.
So do you know if they have like unions in Nigeria?
They do, but not really for a lot of corporate roles. Maybe for unskilled labor, so bus drivers.
Okay.
I know we have a lot of market women associations.
Yeah.
So artisans, but really the corporate, no, I don't, unless
not
that
even, more so for that kind of working.
I think here in the US as well for unions.
I feel like government, some certain governments.
Unions are not as popular as it used to be, but usually it is for more blue collar type positions. But I will say, listen, I remember a very funny story, right? And let me tell on Jumoke first. So I remember when Jumoke was trying to get her driver's license, right? So she would come to work and she would be so annoyed, like, what? Like, I can't believe, like, I've been driving for years. I'm in this, why do I even need to take a driving test? So there was always this debate between me and her because she would always say, why am I having to take a driving test? And I'm like, because you're coming from Nigeria. I think if anyone should be taking a driving test, it should be you, so that you could know the rules of the land and everything. And she'll be like, this is ridiculous. When she kept going to do the driving test and she kept failing it, but then she kept getting so mad that she was failing it.
What were you not doing?
Did you once try to drive without your shoes and then you?
Well, so that was weird, and so my husband taught me how to drive, and we almost broke up because you know how it is. And now people say you'll never allow your spouse to teach you how to drive. So I learned how to drive back in Nigeria without wearing shoes, which is weird.
No, I've heard about people who do that.
I kind of need to feel the pedal and the brake with my skin.
I
cannot do I cannot.
And in the US, you cannot take a driving
test.
So
that's how I've been driving for years, and I mean completely. Shoes. And so my first driving test, of course, I got comfortable and then flicked off my shoes, and then the instructor looked at me and it was, I'm sorry, ma'am, you failed. And I was, what? Like,
I've not even done that test.
That was the first one. So failed. I failed 4 times.
But not because she wasn't failing because of the driving. She was failing just because of the things that.
Yeah. And I actually know someone who actually failed her driving. Oh my God. She didn't even start.
I know, and
take the car
I think after the first, I just got really, really extremely nervous, and I think this third one I got to a point, I was very confident, and she was, take your left, and I took a right, and I feel,
oh wow.
And they're not very kind people for some weird reason. It's like they're just waiting for you to make a small mistake, and once you do, that's the end. And so, anyways, the 5th one I passed, but to be honest, I think she took pity on me. It's probably saw my record.
Like you couldn't drive.
Yeah, probably saw my record and I'm like, this one has failed 4 times. It was a lady. Oh gosh. She just passed me. I'm like, let me just let her go. I literally would have hugged her. Like, thank you.
No, the one thing I wouldn't do is drive in Nigeria. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, I cannot drive in Nigeria because when I go to Nigeria and like people are like coming. Like you're driving and they're coming in the same lane and then they're yelling at you. Like, and I'm just like, I'm so confused. Like you're in the lane.
It's
like what are you doing?
Yeah. 4 lanes is gonna
so to
merge.
me personally, I'm sorry, Nigerians who relocate to the United States, but if that's how you've been driving, you need to learn the rules in the US. So when Jumoke used to say, I don't understand, and I'm like, oh no. I used to even be to the other.
I became humble really fast.
If there's anybody who needs to learn the rules in the US, it's you.
I became humbled after the first fail. I was like,
I know that could be frustrating.
Yeah.
4 times.
Yeah.
I know.
Let's ask you this. So what are some of the skills or perspectives in your life in Nigeria that has been particularly valuable here in the US?
Oh, I would say it's coming from the US is a developed country. Nigeria is a developing country. And bringing that perspective here was very helpful. In a way, I think that was what helped me get the position because my manager wanted someone who was completely, different, had a different thoughts, who could come and work with the people here who most of them had never been out of the US, very, entitled, very, in a way, I think she just wanted a different perspective to the role. And I was bringing that, to the position. So like I said, HR is completely different, vastly different in those 2 countries. But I would say my experience learning about Nigeria, learning with learning different. Nigeria is very diverse in culture as well. As much as we're Nigerian, we have the different tribes. We're still very diverse. I'd worked with a lot of experts as well, technical experts who had come from wherever they are to Nigeria and left and all. So it was helpful to just bring that perspective, practicing HR in that context and coming to the US. And in a way, I would say I'm lucky to have both perspective, the local field, we call it field perspective, and the global international perspective of HR, and merging the 2. In a way, I've moved on from that role. I'm no longer in that role. I moved on to another organization. I'm now moving on to another organization. So in a way, the skills and competencies of both the local and field experience and the global international experience has kind of propelled me in my career, leaving this organization that brought me to the US and then moving to another organization and now moving to another international organization.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You know, it's. I think I was doing my master's when maybe one or two people that I knew were actually accepting offers in Nigeria and were going to move back.
So there was a point in time. I also
Yes.
know a few people who
Yeah.
left, especially even in the HR field. I knew that there was a time where people were approaching me to try to come to Nigeria. I'm like, I don't know if after doing practicing HR in the US, practicing HR in Nigeria would be difficult because in the US, the way that HR works is your position, you know, like you could literally talk to people who are way above your pay grade because you're administering policies, right? It doesn't matter what that person's position is. You can basically tell them you need to adhere to this policy. Now, when you go to Nigeria, that's not going to be the same thing because people, based on their position, exactly, like
they kind of need to trust you as well. It takes time to build that trust, build those relationships. Yeah, but I mean, Nigerians could be deferent. It happens where
who are you to tell me
and all that
this?
kind of stuff, and probably would have no choice. Especially if they know it would affect their job and their livelihood, they would adhere to whatever you're forcing them to. But I think for me, it's also very important for you to build those relationships as well, and just help them with different thinking, a different perspective of how things are done.
But again, you worked for, I think, again, to your point of working for a unique organization, right? Your organization was unique.
It was.
There was a few of my friends who did move back to Nigeria, and some of them to practice HR. They all left. They couldn't really handle it because there was just so much even in the terms of harassment, even in the terms of sexual harassment.
Yep.
And that one is actually what blows my mind the most because it's like, you're harassing someone in HR? Like, how do you harass someone who is in HR? But that just shows you that in some of those organizations, it doesn't even matter. Like, they're not really following it because I had a friend who relocated to Nigeria and said she was constantly harassed by her supervisor, which is something that could never happen in the United States.
Yeah.
Not that you couldn't be harassed, but there would be swift things in place that would happen immediately once that person reports it. They're gonna put it on leave. They're gonna do investigations. So it can't just go on unchecked unless someone doesn't report it. But and then to do that to someone in HR would almost be impossible. It would be unheard of.
I mean, the culture in Nigeria, as you know, it's a culture basically. Men in court tend to get away with a lot of things. There are no mechanisms per se. Exactly. There are no mechanisms to want to report, and say, I was discriminated. I didn't get this job because I, ageism. Who do you go to? It's like,
It's I don't remember what exactly the positions that they went for, the few that I know that took offers in Nigeria. It's been a very long time. But I do know is that they're all back here now. So clearly something didn't work out. It's like,
but the funny thing is, I remember those days, right, when they were talking about their packages.
Yes.
They were offering them. Like you would look at your life and be like, what am I doing with my, like, full houses, maids, cars,
so everything. They were more like experts?
No, well, I mean, I think because they were in the US and this companies in Nigeria were approaching them and wanting them to come to Nigeria, wanting their US experience and things like that. So they offered them really unique, great. It was great packages.
I mean, they didn't give you full disclosure onto their compensation package, but you knew it was a very,
but
very
I mean,
great
they had wonderful
everything.
homes, they had maids, so you would look at yourself like, wow. But the trauma of just that change in environment and change in working for companies where, due process happens, and people followed rules. There were regulations. You know that in this US, being that we're in the HR field, there are many times that a manager could approach HR and say, I want to terminate an employee. And HR will say, no, you cannot terminate an employee because we cannot see a clear path to termination, right? We can't just say, because you want to terminate this person, go ahead and terminate the person. We have to say, you've passed this person, all of their performance evaluation has been great. On what grounds are you terminating this person?
Absolutely.
So, but in Nigeria, that may not happen. Someone may say, I want to terminate the person. And who is HR to tell that person who's their superior that, no, you cannot terminate this person?
It depends on the sector, though. I know for federal jobs, for the federal jobs, state jobs, I mean, there's a lot of job security in a way you can't really just terminate or fire people. And that's why people tend to be there for years,
For a long time,
until you retire and all. All the sectors, small scale businesses, anything goes. There's really no clear,
Where there's one
structures
owner.
in place. But exactly,
I just
So-
at that time when it was like really rampant, people were taking offers and moving. I mean, I know one person in particular had one of the executive MBA, so I know that the kind of roles that they were being
wanted that.
offered were great, But it just wasn't something I could have thought to do at that
Right.
time because one, I was just wrapping up my MBA, so I'm sure they were not even going to be like, "Hey, you sit down,"
Yeah. And were you open to doing NYC?
Oh, heck no.
No.
That was another thing. I was like, and then
Were
my
you
husband like, "You're
open
gonna go climb
to
trees."
Yes.
And they're going to post you somewhere where there's no water.
Yeah.
Okay, no.
So I was like, oh, heck no. But then I just thought about it. And then my kids were like toddlers. And I'm like, what's going to happen? I went really deep into that. Like, what's going to happen, like, after school activities, like soccer and things like that. Like, obviously, these people had, like, I don't know if the driver, as they say, for those who don't know what the driver is, it's like a chauffeur. So you know, like, it's going to run things for you. It's different. I guess I still had that perspective of how things were being run here. Oh, hey, you're going to take your kids to this. You're going to do this. You're going to do that.
Yeah.
So
And then
it's
you're going to
the
be stuck in
management
traffic.
for you, yeah.
But I guess that's not how it works at home. They have everything at their beck and call.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't something that was fitting in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
And they're back, like you said. So
yeah, they're
probably
back. So, hey.
It didn't really work out.
Didn't work
yeah,
out.
Yeah. I think maybe the job place. I mean, the job place here too. They're even with the structure, there's some things that still happens in the workplace that is not everywhere has the office politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's just not as random as one person just making all the decisions.
Exactly.
There has to be there's a clear line where you can actually call some things out. But it doesn't mean that you're still not going to be targeted. It doesn't mean that someone is still not going to create a hostile work environment for you. A lot of times in many organizations, even if you have a bad leader and you're the one screaming that this person is treating me unfairly, it takes a while before they end up getting rid of the bad leader. The truth is a lot of the lower employees end up leaving because there's going to be subtle retaliation from those leaders. That is hard to prove sometimes. Even if with HR looking, it's hard to prove because people are going to believe the VP or the director over the associate or the specialist. But it's after a while, the pattern, people start to notice, okay, this person, every single person on your team has quit within a 5-year period.
is wrong.
They start
Something
to look
is
at
wrong.
it. So, so I think every country, their ups and downs, they're good and bad, everywhere.
Yep.
But the good thing that I think the US employer has is just that their laws, their rules, their federal rules, their regulations that need to be adhered to. And the truth of the matter is a lot of employees, even though they don't seek litigation, they could. The burden of proof is on the employer to prove a lot of things that they're doing. But a lot of employees just end up leaving and don't even want any issues and they just leave. But if they pursued it, they could actually get something. Yeah. So if you could go back in time, what advice do you think you would give yourself before relocating to the US? And let me also say this, even from a non-professional standpoint, I remember a few years ago, I had a family member that relocated to the US. And then she proceeded to tell me that when she was relocating to the US with her child and her husband, she gave away everything that she owned. She gave away all the clothes.
coming here, she
Coming
gave
here.
everything away.
And so to me, one of the things I'm going to say is, for those who are relocating, don't give away all your things. Like
Why?
you need to wear clothes when you're here. You need to, because when you come, you don't also want to be a burden to the people that you're coming to meet. I mean, you came at a different time. You were coming by yourself. You were coming in a professional setting. But there's so many people who are also relocating that they just think, people think once they land at the airport in the US, their life is just going to change. And there's still a process that you have to go
What
through.
is wrong with your clothing that you're getting rid of?
no,
and you're
and
retiring?
give
If they're coming
everything
during
away.
winter, technically, I mean, they would probably need to prepare for a new wardrobe for winter.
But
but
you still need to come with what you have,
True.
right? Because when you're leaving to go to a whole new country, no one is, depending on who you're coming to stay with, no one is taking you to the shop. No one is taking you to the mall the next day you land and giving you a whole new wardrobe. It's different. in America, people are here hustling and doing stuff. So don't think that once you land, everyone, oh yeah, let's go, let's get you this. Yeah. Anyway, but from your perspective, what would you advise? What if you look back now? What are some of the things that you wish you knew before you left Nigeria to relocate to the United States?
I would say probably just learning about the U.S. system, learning about credit scores and debts and loans and basically how it works.
Yeah.
I probably just reading more on it. Nigeria doesn't have a credit system and all, so it was a little bit of, I kind of knew, the US or most developed countries kind of lived on credit and all, but there were a lot of things I couldn't do. I had to get on, so I had to get a phone and I didn't have a credit score for some reason. I couldn't get on a plan for some reason. I think I wanted to buy, when I got an apartment and I wanted to get internet for my place, but because I didn't have an history of a credit score, I had to, I think, put down like a security deposit. There were a lot of things I kind of had to put in place, like security deposits and all. But I had income. I had a good job. I had extra funds they had given to me. So it was easy to, pay all the stuff and what the heck, just pay it off and be good.
Those are some of the challenges, definitely. Yeah. Any other challenges as being in,
because she just has this unique situation.
Yeah.
Most of the people who are relocating to the United States, especially when you're relocating at an older age, when you're over 30, right? I think her situation is so unique because she had a job, she had a place to stay, she had all of these things. That's not normal. A lot of people are relocating to the United States. Now they're trying to enter into the workforce. Now you're trying to enter into the workforce at over 30 years old. You don't really have any of the work history in the United States. You don't have you don't have income. You don't have all of these things. So you're pretty much starting from scratch. You also have to kind of tailor your expectations, right? You have to be, so some people now, you could be a bank manager in Nigeria. Then you decide to relocate to the United States in your 30s. Could you get a bank job? Could you get a job equivalent to what you had? Yes. But do you also need to be open to coming in and starting at an entry level just to get acclimated with the United States systems and practices? You might, you might. Yeah. So...
And to your point, I mean, mine was unplanned relocation. I think for most people who come as immigrants, it's usually planned. Yeah. And so aside coming with that notion, I would say begin to, develop your skills, begin to look at, okay, what sector do I want to work in? Go on the internet. There's so many free courses you can do. Mm-hmm. Like you said, start from the scratch, volunteer if you can. Not just as you come here and you're getting a job that pays you $120,000 annual. That might not happen at the beginning, but be open to taking lower level positions. Most importantly, you want to get the experience, like you said. Yes. Get online, do free courses. You probably can afford to, go to school yet, get maybe student loan to start school and all that kind of stuff. So I would say at least for those plans, you already know you're coming, is begin to research, learn about debt, learn about credit scores. A lot of Nigerians come here, they get secured credit cards and they get unsecured credit cards and they just get messed up with the whole credit system. Just swipe. So you have to be very educated about that as much as, yes, it's a credit system, everything here is not free. You don't want to get into unnecessary debt. You don't want to get into consumer debt. It makes no sense. You have to be very prudent, manage your money wisely. I would also say I was lucky when I did come because I didn't have a child at that time. And so it was just me. And so there was no dependent per se that I had to, daycare, school,
I think
crèche.
that makes a huge difference.
And all that kind of stuff. If I had come with kids or come with a child, it would have probably been a different ball game.
Yeah. Which also is another struggle, right? Because I've also seen people who come with their children, and then there's also that aspect and the trauma to the child that people need to really think about, right? Because when you bring a child who grew up in Nigeria and especially when they're in their teenage years, the schools here can be very, very traumatizing because when they come into the school system, just the way that they're treated, the way that they're speaking.
Did you both experience that in schools?
No, because we didn't come to high school here, right? So college is a little bit different. But I do have friends who relocated with teenage children or children in middle school. Yeah. And some of them, it really changed the child's behavior, the way the child, I know a child who she just was so bubbly and sweet and just, just sweet when she first came. But then going into the school system and being traumatized just by people making fun
Bullying
of her,
too.
making fun of the way she spoke, making fun, there were times where she would say everybody would pick a partner and they wouldn't pick her. So that is something to also think about. A child has to really, even who is that? The girl that did Insecure. She also talked about it. The Nigerian girl in Insecure. I can't remember. What's her name now?
Was it a documentary on Netflix?
No, she actually gave an interview and she talked about some of the trauma that she went through when she came into the school system and the way she was treated coming with her Nigerian accent.
In this particular era now, we're speaking like within the last 3-4 years, things haven't changed.
I mean,
I really want to be a fly on the wall in a classroom or in a school setting. in high
listen,
school.
we know how even the kids that are not from a different country in the high school system in America, public school system in America, sometimes the way that just from what side of the tracks that you're from, you're treated in high school and just the bullying and stuff that goes on. Then to now talk about you're coming from a whole different country, come on.
Yeah, I don't have that experience.
Yeah. So you were
I don't.
older. You were older.
Here.
Yeah.
And I had my child here, so thankfully,
Yes.
you can
Yeah.
just grow with them.
I think that it's something to consider. I mean, obviously, if you're relocating your whole family because you want to give them a better life, there's nothing you can do. You're going to need to do what you need to do, and you hope that child will be tough enough to handle it. But there is that aspect. That aspect cannot be negated. What advice would you give someone who is at home right now and they've been thinking about it, they want to relocate, and from any country, from any developing country, not only Nigeria, from anywhere, who might be thinking that they want to relocate for better opportunities to a different country?
Yeah.
Any closing pointers that you would like to give?
The young ones, you're still back home, is do well at school.
Yes,
I think that's very key. And we're like, education. I'm like, it's still not a scam. It's still one of the very, foundation that can literally propel you. My experience was different, but I know people who have moved or immigrated just through the education route, having good results, applying for scholarships. The U.S. is amazing for opportunities.
Yes,
I mean, this is an immigrant's land. So all I can tell you is do well at school. First of all, have that foundation and research. Don't assume. We have the internet. It's free. Just research and research and research. I have friends who have immigrated full families to the U.S. through the NIW route. Have you heard about it? It's called the National Interest Waiver.
Really? Never heard of that.
So that's a path to immigration to a green card in the U.S.
Okay.
It's called exceptional ability. All you have to do to prove to the U.S. government is I have exceptional ability. I have an advanced degree. I've published papers or I have a patent. Just something great. And if I come into this country, I would not be a burden to the government. You do not need to have a job. You don't need to have a job offer. You just need to have that ability. And basically saying, I can produce income through my talents and my skills and my competences.
And I don't need anything from the US government.
No, I will not be a burden.
That's
I will not
excellent.
apply for benefits. And I know a lot of friends who worked in the same organization come through the NIW route. And it's a straight green card. And it's funny because I realized a lot of people don't know that pathway. So it's called the NIW. It's called the National Interest Waiver.
NIW.
NIW. So please Google it. You can work, with an immigration lawyer. You can petition for yourself. It does happen. For people who can petition for themselves. It's like I said, NIW. I think it's an EB2 visa type of ish. But there's information on the internet. Just Google it. Do your research. Talk to people. Ask questions. Look for scholarships, and a lot of U.S. universities and colleges will literally provide you full-blown scholarships. That's a pathway as well. Come in on a master's degree, on an F1 visa, you can adjust your status to, whatever you want to. You can find a job, and your employer can, petition and file for you. So different pathways. Don't just limit yourself to one. Yeah. I would encourage you to come legally, though, because if you want to be able to move to another type of visa, it's best to come in illegally. I don't judge whatever people do it. Come to them
legally. It's better for you because
it's
you're able to get jobs
that
and things
way
like
and all the kind of stuff.
I would say there's definitely a plethora of opportunities. You just need to want to know.
Exactly.
Be in the know,
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
the foundation of everything
Yeah.
is education.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Make sure you get your education.
Yeah.
And then with that, you can begin to do
Yeah.
spheres.
Yes.
But definitely. Thank you for that information. I'm
Thank
sure
you so
hopefully
much.
help somebody out
Yeah.
there that's looking to that way.
So guys, please comment, like. Now, if you have some additional questions for Jumoke, as you can see, she just has a wealth of information, and she actually just told us something that we didn't know about.
Yep.
Leave your comment leave a comment, ask your questions, and we'll respond to some of your questions. But please like, comment, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.